Guys, take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day sink into your mattress as the world outside grows quiet. Allow your mind to drift back 200 years. You are safe, you are still, and you are about to enter a world of soft whispers and moonlit gardens. Let my voice be the bridge to your dreams. This narrative explores the fascinating phenomenon of romantic friendships in the 18th and 19th centuries. In an era of strict social codes, women found loopholes in sensibility to form deep, passionate, and lifelong bonds with each other. We travel from the misty hills of Wales with the Ladies of Llangollen to the candlelit drawing rooms of London, uncovering how these women lived together, loved together, and defied society, all while hiding in plain sight. The carriage ride to Llangollen. Close your eyes. Imagine the year is 1778. The air in the rolling hills of the Irish countryside is thick with a heavy, damp mist. The kind of mist that clings to the wool of your cloak and blurs the edges of the world. You are tucked away inside a small, black carriage. It is cramped, smelling of old leather, dried lavender, and the faint metallic scent of the coming rain. Across from you sit two women. They're silent, but their silence isn't one of tension. It is a silence of profound relief. Eleanor Butler and Sarah Ponsonby. To the outside world, they are a scandal, two ladies of noble birth who have abandoned their families, their inheritance, and the expectations of society. But here, in the dim, flickering light of a single swinging lantern, they are simply two souls finally breathing the air of freedom. The carriage jolts over a stone, and the lantern sways. The light dances across the velvet upholstery, casting long, elegant shadows. This is the beginning of a journey that will take them across the sea to Wales, to a place called Llangollen. They aren't looking for a grand life, they are looking for a quiet one. A life where the ticking of a grandfather clock and the rustle of a turning page are the only sounds that matter. The anatomy of an escape. In the Regency era, a woman's life was a series of carefully constructed cages. The corset tightened the body, and the social code tightened the mind. For Eleanor, already in her late 30s, an age the world considered past her prime, the pressure to enter a convent or live as a quiet, invisible dependent was suffocating. For Sarah, much younger and orphaned, the threat was marriage to a man she did not love. Think about the bravery it took to step into this carriage. In the 18th century, a woman without a man was a woman without a map. Yet, as the carriage winds through the dark, muddy lanes toward the coast, Eleanor reaches out and touches Sarah's hand. It is a small gesture, hidden by the heavy folds of their traveling gowns. In this era, such a touch was seen as sensibility, the high-flown emotional intensity that women were encouraged to have with one another. Society saw romantic friendship as a harmless way for women to practice their emotions before marriage. But Eleanor and Sarah knew better. They were using the very rules that restricted them to build a bridge to a new world. As you listen to the rhythmic thud-thud of the horses, feel the coolness of the window glass against your forehead. Outside, the Irish landscape is a patchwork of deep indigos and charcoal grays. There are no streetlights here. only the occasional glow from a distant farmhouse window, a tiny speck of amber in a sea of darkness. The threshold of the unknown. The carriage reaches the port. The air changes. The smell of damp earth is replaced by the sharp, salty tang of the Irish Sea. The sound of the wind grows louder, a low hum that vibrates through the wooden panels of the carriage. They must board a ship. Movement now is slow, deliberate. The heavy trunks, filled with books, maps, and a few cherished tokens, are hauled onto the deck. Eleanor and Sarah stand by the railing, their silhouettes sharp against the gray-white foam of the crashing waves. They are leaving behind the names they were born with to become the Ladies of Llangollen. In the history books, this is often treated as a quaint anecdote. But as we sit here in the quiet of the night, let us recognize it for what it was: a heist. They were stealing their own lives back from a system that demanded they be property. As the ship begins its slow, rhythmic rocking on the water, you might feel your own breathing start to match the tide. The waves are deep, dark, and ancient. They carry the ship toward the Welsh coast, toward a valley shrouded in mystery and emerald green forests. The arrival in the valley. Imagine the first morning in Wales. The mist here is different. It's a valley mist, thick and white like sheep's wool, settling in the hollows of the hills. The carriage has reached the outskirts of Llangollen. The horses are tired, their breath huffing out in little clouds of steam. Eleanor looks out the window and sees it. A modest stone cottage perched on a hill overlooking the River Dee. It is called Plas Newydd. To anyone else, it is just a house. To them, it is a fortress. The sound of the river is a constant, low-frequency white noise, a natural lullaby that has been running over these stones for thousands of years. It is the sound of permanence. As they step out onto the damp grass, the silence of the valley wraps around them. There are no gossiping aunts, no suitors, no forced smiles at dinner parties. There is only the mist, the river, and each other. The weight of the secret. As they enter the house for the first time, the floorboards creak under their boards. The air inside is cool and smells of stone and old wood. They begin to unpack, not just their clothes, but their identities. They decide right then that they will never leave this valley. They will dress in a way that blurs the lines of gender, wearing top hats and tailored waistcoats, yet keeping the long skirts of their station. They will create a life of sweet retirement. But why did society let them get away with it? That is the mystery we will unravel in the hours to come. It was because they were so open about their devotion that no one dared to call it sin. They branded their love as the ultimate form of Victorian virtue. They invited the world to watch them live, and the world, fascinated by their purity, left them alone. As the sun begins to set on their first day in Llangollen, the sky turns a deep, bruised purple. The fire in the heath is lit for the first time, the orange flames licking at the dry logs. The crackle of the wood is the only sound in the room as Eleanor sits down to write the first entry in her journal. We are at last, she might have thought, home. The darkness outside is total now. The valley is asleep. The river continues its endless song. And as you listen to my voice, you are there with them, safe, enclosed in the stone walls of Plas Newydd, protected by the shadows of the Welsh mountains. The journey has just begun, but the rest of the world is far, far away. Sleep now, and let the mist of Llangollen carry you into the next chapter of the story.
Imagine a world where a single glance held the weight of 1,000 words. In the Regency era, a woman's heart was like a locked diary, and the key was often hidden in the palm of a hand or the petal of a flower. The air in the parlor is thick with the scent of dried jasmine and old paper. You are sitting by a small rosewood table. The only light comes from a dying fire in the hearth, casting a warm, flickering amber glow over your hands. Across the room, two women are exchanging a bouquet. To a casual observer, it is a simple gift of nature. But in this era, every blossom was a word and every leaf was a sentence. This was the language of flowers, or floriography. Since society strictly monitored what women could say in public, they developed a silent, beautiful vocabulary. A red rose might mean passion, yes, but a sprig of lavender whispered of distrust or secret love. A yellow iris meant passion hidden behind a mask of friendship. Listen to the silence of the room. It is not empty. It is a silence filled with things unsaid. When a woman handed another a nosegay of lilies of the valley, she was saying, "My life is complete with you." And because men often viewed these floral exchanges as feminine whims or pretty hobbies, they never suspected that an entire conversation of longing was happening right under their noses. Now, shift your gaze to the writing desk. The sound of a quill scratching against parchment is the only rhythm in the night. Scritch, scritch. It is a hypnotic sound, like a tiny bird pecking at a window. In the 1800s, letters were the lifelines of the soul. But Regency women knew their mail was often read by prying family members or nosy servants. To combat this, they turned to the shadows. They used sympathetic ink, lemon juice or milk that remained invisible on the page until it was held close to a warm candle flame. Imagine the scene. A young woman receives a mundane letter about the weather and the price of tea. But at midnight, when the house is asleep and the corridors are dark, she creeps to the fireplace. She holds the paper near the glowing coals. Slowly, magically, brown letters begin to bloom on the white surface. Words of devotion, plans for a secret meeting in the orchard, promises that were never meant for the daylight. The heat from the fire warms her face. The smell of scorched paper is faint but comforting. In that moment, she is not a daughter, a sister, or a future wife. She is herself. Think about the patience required for such a life. Everything was slow. The mail took days to arrive. The ink took minutes to dry. The flowers took weeks to bloom. This slowness forced a kind of deep meditative focus on one's feelings. There was no instant gratification, only the long, steady ache of waiting. As you lie there, feel that same slowness entering your body. The world outside moves too fast, but here, in this candlelit room of the past, time has stretched. The ticking of the clock on the mantel is slow and heavy, like a heartbeat. Some women went even further. They used a technique called cross-writing. To save on postage and to confuse prying eyes, they would write a full page of text horizontally, then turn the paper 90 degrees and write another layer vertically over the first. To a stranger, it looked like a chaotic web of black ink, a visual labyrinth. But to the one who loved the writer, the eye knew exactly which lines to follow. It was a secret code, readable only by the heart that already knew the message. Imagine those ink-stained fingers, the rustle of the silk sleeves against the mahogany desk, the soft sigh as a letter is folded and sealed with hot red wax, the seal pressed down, hiss, locking the secret inside. In the Regency era, having an affair didn't always mean a grand scandal. Often it was a quiet rebellion. It was the decision to give your deepest thoughts to another woman instead of the man society chose for you. It was a theft of intimacy. As the fire in our story begins to turn to grey ash, the room grows cooler. The scent of the lemon juice ink fades. The flowers in the vase bow their heads in the dark. You are safe in the stillness. You are hidden in the shadows where no one can demand anything from you. The language of the night is silence, and in this silence, you are free to drift like a petal falling from a rose, down, down, into the deep, dark waters of sleep. The secrets of the past are safe with us. The ink has dried. The letters are burned. There is only the peace of the midnight hour.
Part 3. The Social Loophole of Sensibility. To understand how these women lived their lives without constant interference, we must look at a strange word from the 18th century: sensibility. Today, we think of being sensible as being practical, but in the Regency era, it meant the exact opposite. To have sensibility was to be overflowing with emotion, to be deeply moved by poetry, by music, and most importantly, by your friends. Imagine a grand drawing room in a London townhouse. The floor is polished marble, cold and white like a frozen lake. Huge crystal chandeliers hang from the ceiling, their 1,000 tiny prisms catching the light of 100 beeswax candles. The air is thick with the smell of expensive perfume, rosewater, musk, and the faint powdery scent of wig starch. In this room, you see two women sitting on a velvet settee. They are holding hands tightly. One is weeping softly as the other reads a poem about eternal devotion. To us, looking back, it looks like a scene of intense romantic passion. But to the men in top hats standing by the fireplace, it was simply sensibility. Society believed that women were naturally more spiritual and refined than men. Because of this, it was considered perfectly normal, even virtuous, for two women to claim they loved each other more than anyone else in the world. Men did not see this as a threat to marriage. They saw it as a practice for marriage. They believed that if a woman could be a loyal, passionate friend to another woman, she would eventually be a loyal, obedient wife to a man. This was the great loophole. The very thing that made Regency society so restrictive also gave women a mask to hide behind. They were allowed to be in love, as long as they called it friendship. As you listen, imagine the weight of those heavy silk dresses, the layers of petticoats, the tight corsets that made every breath a conscious effort. In a world where your body was almost entirely covered and your movements were restricted, the only place you were truly free was in your emotions. Think about the quiet corners of these grand houses, behind heavy velvet curtains, in the withdrawing rooms where the men were not allowed. Women created their own universe. They spoke a language of sighs and shared glances. A sensible woman was expected to be delicate. If she fainted at the sight of her female friend leaving for a long journey, it was seen as a sign of her tender heart. If she spent hours writing 10-page letters about her soul's longing, it was seen as refined intellect. But behind the fainting spells and the poetry was a sharp, calculating reality. Women like Eleanor Butler used this social expectation like a shield. When her family tried to force her into a marriage, she leaned into her sensibility. She claimed her heart was so purely devoted to her friend that it would be a sin to give it to a man. She used their own moral codes to trap them. The clock on the wall of the drawing room chimes midnight. One by one, the candles are snuffed out by a servant using a long silver snuffer. Poof, poof. The light vanishes, leaving only the smell of lingering smoke and the blue moonlight spilling across the floor. As the room darkens, the two women on the settee do not move. They remain in the shadows, their hands still clasped. In the darkness, the performance of sensibility ends, and the reality of their bond begins. Society was happy to stay blind. As long as these women performed their roles as proper ladies in public, no one wanted to look too closely at what happened when the doors were locked. The Regency era was built on the idea of appearances. If it looked like a friendship, then it was a friendship. Feel the relief in that silence, the freedom of not being watched. The heavy curtains are drawn shut, blocking out the prying eyes of the street. Inside, there is only the warmth of the fire and the steady, calm presence of a person who understands your soul without you having to say a single word. As you drift closer to sleep, consider the irony. The very rules designed to keep women in their place were the ones they used to build a secret door. They walked through that door every night, leaving the world of men and marriage behind. The marble floor is cold, but the hearth is warm. The city of London is noisy, but this room is a cocoon. Let your mind become like that quiet room. Let the lights go out one by one. There is no need to perform anymore. There is no need to explain. You are in the quiet space between the words. You are safe in the sensibility of the night. While many women lived within the soft, blurry lines of sensibility, there was one who lived in the sharp, dangerous edges of the truth. Her name was Anne Lister. To the people of Halifax, she was Gentleman Jack, a woman who dressed in black, walked with a masculine stride, and managed her own coal mines. But inside her desk lay a secret that would remain buried for over 100 years. Imagine a massive dark oak desk in a cold stone manor house called Shibden Hall. The room is silent, save for the ticking of a heavy brass clock and the occasional pop of a coal fire. Anne sits here night after night, writing in her diary. But as you lean over her shoulder to look at the pages, your heart skips a beat. The writing is unrecognizable. It is a jumble of Greek letters, mathematical symbols, and strange, jagged lines. It looks like the frantic scratching of a madman or the complex cipher of a wartime spy. This was the crypt hand. Anne Lister knew that if her diaries were ever read, her life would be over. She would lose her land, her reputation, and her freedom. So she invented a language of her own, a secret world where she could finally speak the truth about her affairs with women, her passions, and her refusal to live a lie. In the crypt hand, she didn't just write about her heart, she wrote about her body. She documented her encounters with the same clinical detail she used for her business ledgers. To Anne, her love was as real and as tangible as the coal she pulled from the earth. Think about the loneliness of that pen, writing thousands upon thousands of words that you know no one else can read. The ink is black, matching her clothes, matching the soot of the industrial town outside. Every stroke of the quill was a defiant act. Every hidden sentence was a brick in a wall she built to protect herself. When she wrote in plain English, she talked about the weather, the price of grain, and her travels. But when she switched to the code, her voice changed. It became raw. It became hungry. It became alive. Now imagine the air in that room at Shibden Hall. It is heavy with the smell of damp stone and old ink. The wind howls across the Yorkshire moors, rattling the heavy leaded glass windows. Anne doesn't flinch. She is safe inside her code. She is the architect of her own reality. She would eventually use this code to document her most daring act, a marriage to a woman named Anne Walker. They didn't have a legal ceremony. That was impossible. Instead, they took the sacrament together in a quiet church, exchanged rings in secret, and moved into Shibden Hall together. To the neighbors, they were just two wealthy spinsters living together to save money. But in the diaries, in the jagged Greek symbols, Anne wrote, "I love and only love the fairer sex." It took a century for a descendant to find those diaries, and another lifetime for a scholar to break the code. When the symbols were finally translated, the world realized that the Regency era wasn't just a time of tea parties and manners. It was a time of hidden fires burning beneath the ice. As you lie there, imagine your own thoughts becoming like that crypt hand. Private, untouchable, a language that only you understand. Let the complex symbols of the day, the worries, the to-do lists, the noises, slowly turn into a soft, blurred mist. The heavy oak desk is fading. The scratching of the quill has stopped. Anne Lister has closed her book and blown out the candle. The room is plunged into a thick velvet darkness. You don't need a code to find peace. You only need to let go. The moors are silent now. The coal fire has turned to glowing embers. The secrets of the past are tucked away in a locked drawer, and you are free to drift away. Slowly, very slowly, let your mind wander into the Yorkshire mist. It is cool, it is quiet, and it covers everything in a blanket of stillness.
The moonlight garden and the sensory night. Leave the cold stone of the manor house behind. Step out through the heavy French doors and into the Regency night. The air here is different. It is alive with the scent of damp earth, blooming nightstock, and the sharp, clean coolness of the midnight dew. You are standing on a gravel path that glows like a ribbon of silver under the full, unblinking moon. In the 1800s, gardens were not just for daytime strolls. For women whose lives were governed by the watchful eyes of chaperones in the parlor, the garden at night was a sanctuary of shadows. It was a place where the strict architecture of society dissolved into the organic chaos of the trees. Listen to the sound of your footsteps on the gravel. Crush, crush, crush. It is a rhythmic, grounding sound. Around you, the tall boxwood hedges stand like silent sentinels, casting long, ink-black shadows across the lawn. In the distance, a nightingale begins its song, a high, lonely melody that vibrates through the still air. Imagine two figures walking slowly ahead of you. Their white muslin dresses catch the moonlight, making them look like ghosts drifting through the greenery. They aren't talking. They don't need to. In the Regency garden, the sensory language did the work that words could not. To walk arm in arm was a common courtesy. But in the privacy of the midnight garden, the pressure of a hand against an elbow or the lingering touch of a silk-gloved finger spoke of a deep, quiet intimacy. Here, under the canopy of an ancient willow tree, the world of proper and improper feels very far away. The willow tree's branches hang down like a curtain of living lace. Step inside that curtain. The air here is darker, cooler, and smells of moss and river water. The moonlight filters through the leaves in tiny shimmering coins of light that dance upon the ground. This was the bower, a classic feature of the Regency landscape. It was designed for reflection, but for women in love, it was a room without walls. Within the bower, they could share a book of poetry, leaning close enough to feel the warmth radiating from each other's skin. They could share a secret that would be dangerous in the light of a tea room, but is safe in the belly of the night. Feel the texture of the night, the velvet of a rose petal, cold and soft, the rough, damp bark of the oak tree, the heavy weight of the damp air on your shoulders. In this era, physical closeness between women was never questioned because it was seen as natural. A man would never be allowed to sit this close to a lady without an engagement,
But another woman, she was invisible, she was safe. This invisibility was their greatest power. They lived their most passionate moments in plain sight, protected by the very prejudices that claimed women had no independent desires. As you stand in the center of this moonlit garden, let your worries become like the mist rising off the garden pond. Watch them curl and drift away, thinning out until they vanish into the dark tree line. The world is vast, and you are small, tucked away in a corner of history where time has no meaning. The nightingale has stopped singing. The only sound left is the soft rustle of the leaves in a gentle breeze, a sound like a long, slow exhale. Shh. The moon is beginning its slow descent behind the hills. The silver light is fading into a deep, restful indigo. The garden is closing its eyes. The flowers are folding their petals, keeping the scent of the night locked deep inside their hearts. Follow the white dresses back toward the house. The gravel path is softer now, muffled by the encroaching sleep. Step back through the doors, back into the warmth, and leave the moonlight behind. You are carrying the stillness of the garden back with you. It is in your breath. It is in your limbs. The darkness is a soft blanket, and the history of these hidden gardens is a story that has already been told. You can rest now.
The sanctuary of the shared bed. To a modern mind, the idea of two people sharing a bed is the ultimate sign of intimacy. But to understand the Regency era, we must step out of our own time and into a world where privacy was a luxury and warmth was a necessity. In the 1800s, the shared bed was not a scandal, it was a standard. It was the final, most secure loophole that allowed women to live their truths in the dead of night. Imagine a bedroom in a drafty country estate. The walls are thick stone and the windows are covered with heavy floor-to-ceiling velvet curtains to keep out the biting night air. In the center of the room stands a massive four-poster bed draped in damask and topped with a mountain of goose-down quilts. The fire in the grate has burned down to a deep, pulsing red, the color of a dying star. There is no heating in this house. The corners of the room are freezing, and the air is so cold you can see your own breath in the candlelight. In this world, sharing a bed with a female companion was seen as a practical way to stay warm. It was domestic. It was sisterly. It was, above all, invisible to suspicion. Listen to the sounds of the room. The occasional pop and crackle of the settling embers, the wind whistling through the keyhole, the soft rustle of linen as someone moves under the heavy blankets. Within the privacy of the curtains, a new world was born. When the heavy drapes of the four-poster bed were pulled shut, the two women inside were effectively in a room of their own. The outside world, the servants, the family, the societal expectations ceased to exist. Behind those velvet walls, there was no need for the language of flowers or the crypt hand code.
There was only the low hum of whispered conversation, safe from prying ears. Think about the psychological relief of that space. For a Regency woman, every hour of the day was a performance. She had to walk correctly, eat correctly, and speak correctly. But here, in the cocoon of the bed, the mask could finally be set aside. They could talk about their dreams of independence, their shared finances, or the books they had read in secret. Historians often find letters where women write passionately about the sweetness of our nights. To the Victorian censors who later reviewed these papers, these were just the innocent ramblings of lonely friends. They couldn't imagine a world where women had their own internal lives and desires, and that failure of imagination was the very thing that protected these women for decades. Now imagine the weight of the quilts on your own body. Feel the warmth spreading from your feet to your shoulders. The bed is a fortress. The shadows on the ceiling are long and soft, moving slowly like the tide. In the journals of women like Eleanor Butler, she often recorded the simple, mundane beauty of these nights. She didn't always write of grand passions. She wrote of the comfort of a shared life. The peace of knowing that when you wake up in the dark, you are not alone. In an era where women were often treated as objects to be traded in marriage, this chosen companionship was a radical act of ownership. As the last glow of the fire fades, the room becomes a sea of deep indigo. The four-poster bed is like a ship floating on a silent ocean. You are safe in its hold. There is no more work to be done. There are no more roles to play. The cold of the stone walls cannot reach you. The judgments of the 19th century drawing rooms are miles away, muffled by time and distance. You are drifting now, sinking deeper into the softness of the down, your breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the quiet house. The shared bed was more than just a place to sleep. It was a silent compact. It was a promise that even in a world designed to keep them apart, they would find a way to stay together. Let the darkness wrap around you. Let the heavy velvet curtains of your mind pull shut, blocking out the light of the waking world. There is only the warmth, the silence, and the long, peaceful night ahead. The Boston Marriage and the Independent Spirit. As we leave the misty valleys of Wales and the cramped townhouses of London, we cast our gaze across the vast, churning Atlantic. The year is drifting further into the 19th century. In the burgeoning cities of New England, Boston, Salem, and Philadelphia, a new chapter of this hidden history was being written. Here, the romantic friendship of the Regency era began to evolve into something more structured, more permanent, and eventually more visible. It was called the Boston Marriage. Imagine a crisp autumn morning in a brick-lined street of Boston. The air is sharp with the smell of wood smoke and the salty tang of the harbor. You are walking past a row of elegant, narrow houses with black iron railings and polished brass knockers. Inside one of these houses, two women are having breakfast. The room is filled with light, a pale northern sun that highlights the dust motes dancing in the air. There are no husbands here. There are no children running through the halls. Instead, the walls are lined with books on philosophy, biology, and law. These are the new women, the first generation of women who were allowed to attend college and enter the professional world. The term Boston marriage described two independent, often wealthy women living together in a long-term partnership. Unlike the Regency women who had to hide behind the veil of sensibility, these women were often scholars, writers, and reformers. To society, they were New England spinsters, but to each other, they were everything. Listen to the sounds of this house. The rhythmic clink of a silver spoon against a china cup, the rustle of a morning newspaper, the scratching of a pen as one woman writes a speech for the suffrage movement while the other edits manuscript. It is a house of intellect, a house of shared labor, and a house of deep, quiet devotion. Why did society allow this to flourish? Much like the romantic friendships of the past, the Boston marriage benefited from a peculiar kind of social blindness. It was widely believed that women had no sexual drive of their own. Therefore, two women living together were seen as pure. Society viewed them as two souls who had simply chosen the higher path of intellectual companionship over the base reality of marriage. But within these brick walls, the bond was anything but cold. It was a partnership of equals, a radical concept in a century where a wife was legally considered the property of her husband. In a Boston marriage, there was no master. There was only a shared bank account, a shared library, and a shared life. Think about the courage required to inhabit this space. These women were the pioneers of the single life. They were proving that a woman did not need a male anchor to stay steady in the world. As you listen, feel the strength in that independence. It is a calm, steady strength, like the granite foundations of the Boston Harbor. The sun begins to move across the room, shifting the shadows of the bookcases. One woman stands up and places her hand on the other's shoulder as she passes. It is a brief, domestic touch, the kind of touch that happens 1,000 times in a lifetime of living together. It is a sign of settled, comfortable love. As the afternoon fades into a golden twilight, the city of Boston begins to quiet down. The horse-drawn carriages move slower. The gas lamps on the street are lit, one by one, casting a warm, flickering glow onto the cobblestones. Inside the house, the two women move to the library. They sit in matching leather chairs by the fire. The flames are blue and orange, casting a rhythmic light on their faces. They are growing old together. This is the beauty of the Boston marriage. It wasn't just a youthful fling. It was a commitment that lasted until the final breath. History often tries to erase the passion from these stories. It tries to call them roommates or devoted friends. But when we read their letters, letters that speak of the light of my life and my better half, we see the truth. They were building a world that shouldn't have existed yet. Let the warmth of the library fire settle into your bones. Feel the security of the brick walls. The world outside is changing, moving towards a new century. But inside this house, time is standing still. You are safe. You are independent. You are home. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the city of Boston covered in a soft white blanket of snow. The sound of the world is muffled. The lights in the windows go out. The New England spinsters have closed their books and found peace in each other's company. The night is long, cold, and silent, but you are warm. You are protected by the history of those who paved the way. History is often not what we find, but what we are allowed to see. In the grand libraries and archives of England, there are thousands of boxes filled with the letters of Regency women. But for every letter that remains, there are 10,000 that were surrendered to the flames. Tonight, we look into the hearth, the place where the most intimate secrets of the past went to die. Imagine a cold, stone-floored room in a manor house. It is the morning after a woman has passed away. Her family members, dressed in heavy black mourning clothes, are gathered around her mahogany writing desk. They are not looking for a will. They are looking for propriety. They open the small hidden drawers, the ones that smell of sandalwood and old secrets, and they find them. Bunches of letters tied together with faded silk ribbons. The air in the room is silent, save for the crackle of the fireplace. One by one, the letters are untied. The family members skim the lines that speak of longing, of the touch of a hand, of nights that never ended. Their faces tighten. To them, these words are a threat to the family's honor. They are a stain that must be erased. Without a word, the letters are tossed into the fire. Watch the paper as it meets the heat. The edges curl first, turning a deep scorched brown before bursting into a bright, brief orange flame. The ink, the words of a lifetime of devotion, bubbles for a second before turning to gray ash. Flicker, crackle, gone. In that moment, a woman's true history is deleted from the world. This was known as the Great Burning. In the Victorian era that followed the Regency, families went through a frantic process of purging the diaries and letters of their female ancestors. They wanted to present a history of pure, simple friendships. Anything that suggested a deeper, more complex passion was fed to the grate. But sometimes the fire didn't catch everything. Think about the letters that survived. Some were hidden behind the loose stones of a fireplace. Others were tucked into the secret linings of travel trunks. And some were so cleverly written that the family didn't even realize what they were reading. They read about spiritual unions and heavenly bonds and thought it was merely religious devotion. They didn't understand that for these women, the language of the church was the only way to describe a love that society had no name for. Listen to the rhythmic sound of the wind outside the manor house. It is a lonely, haunting sound. It carries the ghosts of all those burned words. Thousands of pages of poetry, plans for escapes, and whispered confessions are now nothing more than carbon and smoke drifting over the hills of the English countryside. As you lie there, feel the weight of that silence. It is a heavy silence, but it is also a respectful one. We may not have their words, but we have their shadows. We can feel the presence of their stories in the gaps they left behind. Think about the ink that didn't burn. The letters we find today in museums are often scarred. Words have been crossed out with heavy black lines, or pages have been torn in half. These are the scars of history. They tell us that someone, long ago, was afraid of the truth. But even a crossed-out word is a victory. It tells us that something important was once written there. It tells us that a woman's heart was too big for the page she was given. The fire in the room has turned to a heap of glowing white ash. The room is growing darker, and the smell of smoke is fading into the scent of the cold night air. The family has finished their work and left the room. The desk is empty. The drawers are open and hollow. But you know the truth. You don't need the paper to feel the emotion. It is in the air. It is in the stillness of the house. As you drift toward sleep, imagine those burned letters becoming like the dust motes in the moonlight. They are floating all around you. They are soft, weightless, and peaceful. They no longer need to be hidden. They are part of the night now. The history of the fire is over. The silence of the night has taken its place. You are safe in the knowledge that some secrets are too beautiful to ever truly be destroyed. They live on in the quiet pulse of the world. Rest your mind. Let the flames die down. The story is safe. You are safe.
The embroidery hoop and the language of the needle. Leave the dramatic flames of the hearth behind and enter the quiet world of the daylight parlor. It is a slow, rainy afternoon in 1815. The world outside is a blur of gray mist and emerald green, but inside, the air is still and smells of beeswax, dry tea leaves, and the faint, sweet scent of wool. You are sitting in a high-backed chair, watching two women work. In the Regency era, a woman's hands were rarely idle. They were almost always occupied by needlework. This wasn't just a hobby. It was the steady, rhythmic background noise of their lives. In and out, in and out. The sound of a needle pulling silk thread through taut linen is a tiny, sharp whisper. Zip, click, zip. To the men of the house, this was a mindless, decorative task. They saw two women sitting in silence, heads bowed over their embroidery hoops, and they saw domestic bliss. But the embroidery hoop was a mask. It was a shared meditation. It allowed two women to sit together for hours, their knees almost touching, without anyone asking why they weren't doing something more productive. Think about the focus required for a single stitch. You must be precise. You must be patient. As you listen, imagine the feeling of the wooden hoop in your lap, the smooth, polished grain of the oak, the tension of the fabric stretched tight like the skin of a drum. When you are embroidering with someone you love, the silence becomes a bridge. You don't need to speak because your hands are working in the same rhythm. You are sharing the same light from the window. You are breathing the same cool, damp air. In the 19th century, this shared domesticity was the primary way women built their intimacy. It wasn't in grand gestures, but in the 1,000 tiny stitches they made in each other's company. Sometimes the embroidery itself held the secret. Look closer at the fabric. See the intricate patterns of vine and leaf. In a world where letters were burned, women often wrote their history into their handiwork. They would stitch their initials together, entwined in a lover's knot of blue silk. They would hide a tiny private symbol, a specific flower or a date, underneath a decorative border where no one else would think to look. These were the soft archives. While the men were writing history in blood and ink, women were stitching it into the very fabric of their homes. The rain continues to drum against the window pane. It is a hypnotic, muffled sound that isolates the parlor from the rest of the house. The world is small. The world is just this room, these chairs, and the steady movement of the needle. Feel the tension in your own shoulders begin to melt away. The repetitive nature of the work is like a lullaby for the mind. Stitch, pull, rest. Stitch, pull, rest. Your eyes grow heavy watching the silver needle catch the dim light. There is no hurry. In the Regency era, a single piece of embroidery could take months, even years, to complete. They had all the time in the world. As the afternoon light begins to fail, the women finally set down their hoops. Their fingers are slightly cramped, their eyes tired, but their hearts are full. The work they did today will outlive them. It will sit on a table or hang on a wall, a silent witness to the hours they spent in each other's presence. The domestic life of companions was built on these quiet foundations. It was a life of shared teas, shared walks, and shared stitches. It was a boring life to an outsider, but to them, it was a sanctuary of peace. The embroidery hoop is laid aside. The silk threads are tucked back into their wooden box. The room is growing dark, and the rain has turned into a soft, steady drizzle. Let your mind become like that finished piece of linen, smooth, still, and decorated with the quiet memories of the day. You have done enough. The work is finished. Close your eyes and let the rhythm of the needle carry you into a deep, dreamless sleep. In and out, in and out. The night is here, and you are tucked away in the soft, silken folds of the past.
Shadows in the ballroom. Step out of the quiet parlor and into the dazzling, dizzying world of the Regency ballroom. The transition is jarring. The air, once smelling of rain and wool, is now a heavy cloud of expensive beeswax, citrus-scented hair pomade, and the sharp floral bite of lilies. This is the stage where the elite perform their lives. Here, every movement is choreographed and every word is weighed for its social value. The ballroom is a sea of light. Thousands of crystals on the chandeliers vibrate with the sound of the orchestra, the frantic, joyful sawing of violins, and the deep, grounding hum of the cello. The floor is a mirror of polished wood, reflecting the frantic whirl of silk and satin. Gold leaf glimmers on the pillars, and the heat from hundreds of bodies rises to the high painted ceilings. In this space, a woman is never truly alone. She is watched by her mother, her rivals, and potential suitors. But look closely at the edges of the room, the shadows of the ballroom. In the corners of the room, among the wallflowers and the chaperones, you see them. Two women standing by a marble pillar, their fans fluttering in a synchronized rhythm. To the men passing by, they are merely confidants, discussing the latest gossip or the quality of the punch. But under the cover of the music, their conversation is a lifeline. The fan was a powerful tool in the Regency ballroom. It was a shield, a signal, and a mask. By holding the fan a certain way, a woman could block her face from the rest of the room, creating a tiny 3-inch sanctuary of privacy. In that small shadow, she could whisper a truth that the orchestra's music drowned out for everyone else. Listen to the music. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The waltz is beginning. It is a scandalous new dance, one where partners actually touch. But while the men lead the women in circles, the real connections are often happening in the pauses between the dances. Imagine the sensation of a crowded room where you feel entirely invisible. For women who loved women, the ballroom was a place of extreme irony. They were surrounded by the pressure to find a husband, yet the very chaos of the event provided the perfect cover for their own devotion. They could dance together, ladies' sets were common when men were in short supply, and they could touch, laugh, and lean into each other without a single eyebrow being raised. As you lie there, feel the floor beneath you stop spinning. The music is growing distant, as if the ballroom doors have been slowly closed. The frantic energy of the dance is fading, replaced by the cool, quiet air of the hallway. The ballroom was a place of performance, but it was also a place of hiding in plain sight. These women were masters of the public secret. They wore the gowns, they danced the dances, and they smiled at the suitors, but their hearts remained in the shadows, tucked away with the person standing right beside them. Think about the relief of leaving that bright, loud room, the transition from the golden light to the blue moonlight of the carriage outside, the silence that rushes back in like a tide. The corset is still tight, the hair is still pinned, but the performance is over for the night. In the carriage, as it rattles away from the grand house, the two women finally lean back against the leather cushions. The glow of the ballroom is a fading memory in the distance. The real world, their world, is the darkness of the carriage and the steady, rhythmic sound of the wheels on the cobblestones. The chandeliers have been lowered. The candles are being snuffed out by the servants one by one. The ballroom is returning to the dark, empty hall it was meant to be. The ghosts of the dancers are gone, and only the scent of wilted flowers remains. Let your mind drift away from the lights. You are no longer on display. You are back in the quiet, safe shadows of the night. The Library of Plas Newydd. We return now to the misty valleys of Wales, back to the stone walls of Plas Newydd, the home of the Ladies of Llangollen. If the ballroom was a stage for performance, the library was their inner sanctum. It was the heart of their sweet retirement. To understand the depth of their bond, we must understand the room where they spend 40 years of their lives, surrounded by the thoughts of the greatest minds in history. Imagine the door to the library swinging open. It is a heavy, dark oak door that moans slightly on its hinges. The air inside is still and cool, carrying the intoxicating scent of old vellum, dried ink, and the earthy, sweet smell of beeswax used to polish the shelves. The walls are not made of stone here. They are made of books. Thousands of leather-bound volumes, their spines glinting with gold leaf in the dim light, rise from the floor to the vaulted ceiling. The windows are narrow and arched, glazed with stained glass that tints the afternoon sun into pools of deep crimson and forest green. This was their universe. While the rest of the Regency world was obsessed with marriage and money, Eleanor Butler and Sarah Ponsonby were obsessed with the soul. Listen to the sounds of the library. It is a room of textures. The soft thud of a heavy book closing, the crisp, dry crinkle of a page being turned, the rhythmic ticking of a tall grandfather clock in the corner, marking the passage of their quiet, shared decades. In this room, the two women sat in matching Gothic chairs side by side. They spent their days reading aloud to one another. Think about the intimacy of a shared voice. To read to someone is to give them your breath and your focus. As Eleanor read the verses of Virgil or the philosophy of Rousseau, Sarah would listen, her needle moving silently through her embroidery. They were building a shared intellectual landscape, a map of the world that only the two of them could navigate. This library was famous. Despite their desire for isolation, the Ladies of Llangollen became a curiosity of the age. Famous men like Wordsworth, Byron, and the Duke of Wellington traveled over the rugged mountains just to catch a glimpse of this house and its inhabitants. But when the guests left, the door was bolted again. The library returned to its true purpose, a fortress of two. In the margins of their books, they left tiny notes, a pencil mark next to a passage about friendship, a pressed wildflower between pages of poetry. These weren't just books, they were the diary of a lifelong conversation. Feel the stillness of the room enter your own body. The library at Plas Newydd was designed to be a liminal space, a place between the world of men and the world of spirit. As you lie there, imagine yourself sinking into one of those high-backed velvet chairs. The fabric is worn and soft against your skin. The fire in the small grate is a low orange glow, casting long dancing shadows across the rows of books. There is no pressure to speak here. There is no pressure to be anyone other than yourself. In the library,
Eleanor and Sarah were free from the corsets of their social class. They wore their hair short and their waistcoats tailored, living as the masters of their own small kingdom. The sun has finally set behind the Welsh mountains. The pools of colored light have faded into a uniform, deep shadow. The only light left is a single candle on the reading desk. Its flame is steady, illuminating the silver hair of the two women as they lean in toward the same page. The rest of the world is a chaotic, noisy place of war and politics, but inside the library there is only the scent of old paper and the steady, comforting presence of a person who has known you for 40 years. It is a love that has moved beyond the frantic heat of youth and into the cool, deep waters of a life shared. Close your eyes and imagine the library becoming dark. The grandfather clock continues its slow, hypnotic beat. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The books are silent on their shelves, guarding the secrets within their pages. You are safe in the sanctuary of the stone walls. The mist of the valley is pressing against the glass, but it cannot come inside. You are surrounded by the wisdom of the ages and the peace of a house built on devotion. Let your mind become like an empty shelf, waiting for the dreams of the night to fill it. The candle has been snuffed out. The smoke rises in a thin gray ribbon before vanishing into the dark. There is only the silence. There is only the peace.
A walk through the mist. We leave the library's warmth and step through the heavy garden gate. The world outside is no longer green or brown. It has been swallowed by a thick, white Welsh mist. This is a silent weather, where the air is so heavy with moisture that it muffles every sound, turning the landscape into a dream. Listen to the world. The River Dee is somewhere nearby, but its roar has been softened to a low, rhythmic thrumming, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the earth. Your boots sink into the damp, mossy grass, making a soft squelch that feels grounding. The mist clings to your eyelashes and cools your skin, a gentle touch from the spirit of the valley. For Regency women, these long, aimless walks were more than exercise. They were an escape from the interiority of the home. In the mist, there are no windows where a curious neighbor might watch you. There are no servants to overhear your whispers. The mist is a white curtain drawn by nature to give you the privacy that society denies you. Imagine the two women walking ahead of you. They are wearing heavy wool cloaks, the fabric darkened by the dampness. Their walking sticks click rhythmically against the occasional stone. Clack, clack, clack. In the mist, their silhouettes blur. They become one shape, moving in perfect unison through the white void. They talk about the things that don't belong in a drawing room. They talk about the passage of time, the changing of the seasons, and the quiet fear of what happens when one of them must eventually walk this path alone. But in the presence of the ancient mountains, those fears seem smaller. The mountains have seen 1,000 years of mist. They have seen 1,000 years of love and loss. Stop for a moment. Stand perfectly still. Feel the absolute silence of the valley. Even the birds are quiet, tucked away in the hollows of the trees. The only thing you can hear is the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. The mist is not cold, it is a cool, damp embrace. It smells of wet stone, pine needles, and the clean mineral scent of the river. As you stand there, imagine the boundaries of your own body softening. Like the women in the mist, you are becoming part of the landscape. Your worries are being dissolved by the white light, turning into nothing more than vapor. These walks were a meditation. They taught the women of Llangollen to be still. In a world that was rapidly changing, with the Industrial Revolution beginning to darken the skies of the cities, this valley remained a sanctuary of the eternal present. There was no then or next. There was only the mist, the path, and the person walking beside you. As the women turn back toward the house, the orange glow of a single window begins to pierce through the white. It looks like a small, warm star floating in the fog. It is a beacon of home. As you follow that light, feel your limbs growing heavy with the pleasant fatigue of the walk. The damp air has made your lungs feel clean and clear. The rhythmic movement of the walk have prepared your mind for the stillness of sleep. The house is waiting. The mist will stay outside, guarding the valley through the long night. You are moving toward the warmth, toward the fire, and toward the deep, heavy rest that follows a day spent in the open air. The mist is closing in behind you, erasing the path you just took. The past is gone. The future is hidden. There is only this moment of transition from the cool world of the valley to the warm world of dreams. The financial loopholes and the price of freedom. In the Regency world, freedom was not a right, it was a commodity. To live outside the bounds of marriage, a woman needed more than just a brave heart. She needed a full purse. Tonight, we look at the cold, hard numbers behind the soft, moonlit romances. We explore how these women used their inheritances, their pin money, and the strange legal loopholes of the 1800s to buy a life that society said they shouldn't have. Imagine a small iron-bound strongbox sitting on a velvet-covered table. The key turns in the lock with a heavy metallic clink. Inside are not jewels or lace, but stacks of paper, deeds, banknotes, and ledgers. For women like the Ladies of Llangollen, these papers were the true walls of their fortress. In a time when a woman's wealth usually passed to her husband the moment she said, "I do," remaining unmarried was a radical financial strategy. By staying single, or femme sole in the legal language of the time, a woman maintained control over her own destiny. She could sign contracts, she could sue, and most importantly, she could decide exactly who shared her roof and her bed. Imagine the rhythmic sound of a silver coin spinning on a wooden table. Whir, slap. Wealthy women often received an allowance from their families, intended for dresses and tea parties. But many channeled this money into a shared fund with their female companions. They pooled their resources, creating a joint economy that allowed them to buy land, hire servants, and maintain a household that looked perfectly traditional from the outside. There was a certain gentlemanly quality to this. By acting like the masters of their own estates, managing crops, negotiating with tenants, and tracking every penny, they earned a level of respect that shielded them from gossip. Society was often willing to overlook a strange living arrangement if the women involved were wealthy enough to maintain a high social standing. Money in the Regency era was the ultimate silencer. Think about the security of a well-run home. The sound of the kitchen maid scrubbing the hearth in the distance, the smell of fresh bread rising, the knowledge that the roof over your head is paid for by your own hand. For women without a grand inheritance, the struggle was harder, but the loopholes still existed. Some took up feminine professions, governesses, seamstresses, or keepers of dames' schools, and lived together in frugal comfort. They shared the cost of coal, the cost of candles, and the cost of bread. This wasn't just survival, it was a quiet, collective independence. They were proving that two women could form a household that was as stable and as legitimate as any family led by a man. As you lie there, feel the stability of the ground beneath you. The uncertainty of the world is locked outside, and inside, everything is accounted for. There is enough wood for the fire. There is enough oil for the lamp. There is enough peace for the soul. The financial loopholes were the invisible ink of their independence. While the laws were written by men, for men, women found the gaps between the lines. They used the system to dismantle the system, one ledger entry at a time. It was a slow, patient victory. The candle on the desk is burning low, illuminating the neat rows of numbers in the account book. The ink is dry. The box is locked. The day's business is done. In the silence of the night, the weight of the coins and the deeds fades away, leaving only the freedom they purchased. It is a quiet, heavy freedom, the kind that allows you to close your eyes and know that tomorrow belongs to you. Let your mind rest in that security. You are protected. You are sustained. The ledger of your life is in balance, and the night is yours to keep. The silent compact and the art of looking away. Have you ever wondered why in an age of such rigid morality, these women weren't constantly dragged into the town square or cast out of society? The answer lies in a fascinating, invisible agreement, the silent compact. This was the art of looking away. It was a collective decision by Regency society, and especially by the men who ran it, to ignore what they couldn't control, so long as it didn't disrupt the public peace. Imagine a dinner party in a grand oak-paneled hall. The table is laden with heavy silver, sparkling crystal, and the rich, dark glow of port wine. The men are talking of Napoleon, of the Corn Laws, and of the expansion of the empire. At the end of the table sit two women. They share a plate, they whisper to one another, and their devotion is obvious to everyone in the room. Yet the men do not stop their conversation. They do not point. They do not whisper. Why? Because to acknowledge the true nature of the women's bond would be to admit that women had a world of their own, a world that didn't include men. And to the Regency male ego, that was a thought too dangerous to entertain. Listen to the muffled sounds of the house, the servants moving in the hallways, the ticking of the clock, the low murmur of the authorized world. The silent compact was built on a foundation of strategic ignorance. As long as a woman was a good daughter, a charitable neighbor, and a refined lady, society gave her a privacy pass. They called her relationship a whim, or spinsterly devotion, or eccentricity. By labeling it as something small and harmless, they didn't have to confront it as something powerful and revolutionary. Think about the comfort of being hidden in plain sight. For these women, the silence of the world was a shield. They leaned into the stereotypes. They played the role of the pious companions or the intellectual sisters. They gave the world a version of themselves that was easy to digest, while keeping the meat of their lives for themselves. It was a delicate dance. If they became too loud, the shield would break. But as long as they kept their voices low and their doors locked, the silent compact held. It was a mutual agreement. I will not see your truth, and in return, you will not challenge my status quo. As you lie there, feel the stillness of a world that has stopped asking questions. The pressure to explain yourself is gone. The need to justify your life to the world has evaporated into the cool night air. You are existing in the gaps between what is said and what is known. In the Regency era, silence was a currency, and these women were very, very rich. They bought their peace with their discretion. They built their lives in the unspoken, a territory where the laws of men had no power because the men refused to admit the territory even existed. The dinner party is over. The guests have departed, their carriages echoing away into the darkness. The grand hall is empty, the candles dripping their last bits of wax on the silver. The public world has gone to sleep. Now the silence changes. It is no longer the silence of the compact. It is the silence of the home. It is the deep, honest quiet that only comes when the world has finally stopped watching. Let your mind drift into that space. You are not a character in someone else's story. You are not a topic of conversation. You are simply a presence, resting in the dark, protected by the shadows that no one wants to look into. The world has looked away, and in that turning of the head, you have found your freedom. Poetry of the night and the written heart. In the Regency era, when the physical world was locked behind high stone walls and heavy silk curtains, the soul traveled through poetry. For women whose lives were a series of unsaid things, the poem was the only vessel strong enough to carry the weight of their truth. Tonight, we listen to the poetry of the night, the verses written by candlelight, meant for only one pair of eyes to see. Imagine the sound of a quill moving across high-quality vellum. It is a soft, rhythmic shh, shh sound, like a secret being whispered to the paper. The ink is still wet, reflecting the tiny flame of the bedside candle. This is the hour of the midnight muse, when the house is asleep and the only boundaries left are the edges of the page. Women of this time were highly educated in the arts of sensibility and verse. They read Sappho in the original Greek and translated the romantic sonnets of Petrarch. But when they picked up the pen themselves, they created a new kind of poetry. It was a poetry of divine union, a blend of religious devotion and earthly passion that allowed them to express their love for each other without ever breaking the social code. Listen to the cadence of the words. They wrote of souls entwined, of hearts that beat as one, and of the sweet nectar of a sister's love. To a casual reader, these were merely flowery expressions of friendship, but to the recipient, these were declarations of war against the coldness of the world. Each stanza was a promise. each rhyme was a bond. Think about the physical act of receiving such a poem, the feel of the folded paper, still warm from the writer's hand, the smell of the wax seal, sometimes scented with a drop of rose oil or crushed violets. In a world without the instant connections of the modern day, a poem was a physical piece of another person's soul that you could keep under your pillow or press against your heart in the dark. As you lie there, feel the rhythm of the verse entering your own pulse. Da-dum, da-dum. The iambic pentameter of the Regency poets is the rhythm of a resting heart. It is steady, it is predictable, it is safe. The poems often spoke of nature, comparing their love to the clinging ivy or the hidden spring in the desert. These metaphors weren't just decorative, they were a way of saying that their love was a force of nature, as inevitable as the tide and as ancient as the stars. It was a way of claiming that their bond existed before the laws of men and would continue long after the laws were forgotten. The candle is flickering now, reaching the end of its wick. The shadows of the bedposts stretch and yawn across the ceiling. The writer lays down her pen. Her fingers are stained with black ink, a mark of her labor, a mark of her devotion. She gazes at the finished lines, the words finally still on the page. The poem is a bridge. It connects the I to the you in a way that the physical world rarely allowed. In the poem, they could be kings and queens of their own country. In the poem, they could be free. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, let your thoughts become like those lines of poetry, soft, fluid, beautiful. You don't need to make sense of the world tonight. You only need to feel the rhythm of it. The ink is drying. The book is closing. The midnight muse has finished her work and is ready to rest. The paper is tucked away. The room is silent. The only poetry left is the sound of the wind in the trees and the steady, quiet breathing of the night.
The midnight tea and the ritual of the hour. The grand clocks of the manor have long since finished their 12 heavy tolls. The world of the servants and the world of the neighbors have vanished into the deep black velvet of the Regency night. But in a small sitting room, tucked away at the back of the house, a tiny fire still glows, and a silver kettle begins to sing its low, bubbling song. This is the hour of the midnight tea, the most sacred ritual of the shared life. Imagine the sound of the water reaching its peak. Hiss, bubble, sigh. It is a comforting, domestic sound that signals the beginning of the end of the day. The tea is not served in the grand parlor with the heavy silver trays and the stiff-backed chairs. Here, it is poured into thin porcelain cups that are warm to the touch and decorated with delicate blue willow patterns. The steam rises in a white swirling ribbon, carrying the scent of Earl Grey, bergamot, and wood smoke. This ritual was the final compact of the day. After the public performances, after the letters were written, and the embroidery was put away, there was this, the simple, quiet act of sharing a warm drink in the dark. Listen to the rhythmic tink-tink of a silver spoon stirring sugar into the cup. It is a tiny musical sound that punctuates the silence. In the Regency era, sugar was a luxury, a sign of a well-kept home, but here it is just a sweetness shared. The two women sit in low chairs, their feet tucked toward the warmth of the embers. They don't talk about the sensibility of the ballroom or the financial loopholes of their estate. They talk about the small things, the way the light caught the garden pond this morning, the simple, heavy reality of being alive and being together. Think about the heat of the cup in your own hands. Feel the warmth traveling up your arms and settling in your chest. The midnight tea was a form of grounding. In a society that demanded women be ethereal, spiritual, and delicate, this was a moment of pure physical comfort. It was a reminder that they had bodies, and that those bodies deserved to be nurtured and warmed. The fire is dying down now, the orange coals turning to a soft, powdery gray. The room is growing darker, but the tea is still warm. There is no hurry to finish. The night is a vast open space, and they are the only ones awake to inhabit it. For over an hour, we have walked through gardens and libraries, sheltered by the silent compact of a society that chose not to see. But what happened when the veil was torn? What happened when the secret became too loud to ignore? In 1811, in the cold, grey city of Edinburgh, the world of romantic friendship faced its most dangerous trial. This was the case of Jane Peary and Marianne Woods, two women whose lives were nearly destroyed by a single whisper. Imagine a prestigious boarding school for young ladies. The building is tall, made of dark, soot-stained stone that seems to absorb the light of the Scottish sun. Inside, the floors are scrubbed clean, and the air smells of lye soap and cold porridge. Jane and Marianne were the headmistresses, two women who had worked for years to build a reputation of impeccable virtue. They shared a bed, as was the custom, and they shared a dream of independence. But one night a student, a young girl named Jane Cumming, claimed to have heard sounds from their room. She whispered to her grandmother that the two women were engaged in lewd behaviors. This wasn't just gossip. It was a match dropped into a powder keg. Within days, every student was pulled from the school. The halls became silent. The dream was shattered. Listen to the echo of an empty building, the sound of a door slamming in a long, hollow corridor. The silence of the Peary and Woods case was different from the silence of Llangollen. This was the silence of social death. The two women did something extraordinary. They sued for libel. They took their private lives into the highest courts of Scotland. For years, the most powerful judges in the land debated the nature of their friendship. But here's the irony of history. The judges ultimately ruled in favor of the women, not because they believed in their innocence, but because they refused to believe that refined upper-class women were even capable of such acts. One judge famously stated that the crime was so unthinkable in Britain that it simply could not have happened. Once again, the strategic ignorance of men became the shield for women. The judges chose to protect the idea of womanly purity rather than face the reality of womanly passion. Jane and Marianne won their case, but they lost everything else. Their school was gone. Their names were forever linked to scandal. Think about the psychological toll of such a victory. To be told you are innocent only because you are too weak or too pure to be guilty. To have your deepest bond analyzed by men in powdered wigs who don't even believe you have a soul of your own. As you lie there, feel the cold wind of the Scottish moors pressing against the glass. The scandal is a reminder that the Regency paradise was always fragile. It existed in the gaps, and when those gaps were closed, the pressure was immense. But even in the ruins of their reputation, Jane and Marianne stayed together. They moved to a smaller house, away from the prying eyes of the city. They returned to the silence, but this time it was a silence they had fought for. It was a silence of survival. The courtrooms are empty now, the judges are long dead, the legal transcripts have turned to yellowed, crumbling parchment. The noise of the scandal has faded into the background radiation of history. Let the tension of the trial leave your body. The danger has passed. The secret has been tucked back into the shadows. You are safe in the quiet aftermath of the storm. The gray stone of Edinburgh is fading into the dark. The sound of the gavel is replaced by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the night. You have survived the scandal. You have survived the judgment. There is nothing left to defend. The weight of the corset. To understand the internal lives of Regency women, we must first understand the external world that bound them. Every morning, before a woman could face the world, she had to be constructed. She had to be encased in layers of linen, whalebone, and silk. Tonight we look at the physical reality of the era, the weight of the corset, and how the act of unlacing was the ultimate ritual of intimacy and trust. Imagine the sound of a corset being tightened. It is a rhythmic, straining sound, the creak of stay laces being pulled through silver eyelets. Cinch, pull, cinch. The corset was not just a garment, it was a social contract made of fabric. It forced the spine to be rigid, the chest to be high, and the breath to be shallow. It was the physical manifestation of the proper Regency lady, upright, restrained, and unyielding. But think about the logistics of this beauty. A woman could not easily lace or unlace herself. She required assistance. While many had ladies' maids, those who lived in romantic friendships turned this daily necessity into a private ritual. In the sanctuary of the bedroom, the act of unlacing the corset was the moment the public lady died and the private woman was reborn. Listen to the silence of the dressing room. The only sound is the soft rustle of a gown being lowered and the rhythmic shh of laces being loosened. As the tension in the fabric breaks, so does the tension in the body. The first deep breath after a day of restriction is a profound physical relief. It is a return to the self. When a companion performed this task for her partner, it was an act of extreme vulnerability. To stand with your back to someone, allowing them to undo the architecture of your social identity, required absolute trust. In those moments, the boring history of the day dissolved. There were no tea parties or bank ledgers here. There was only the warmth of skin, the coolness of the air, and the steady hands of the only person who truly knew you. Pause. As you lie there, feel the weight of your own body settling into the mattress. Imagine that same sense of release. Let the corset of your day, the stress, the responsibilities, the expectations, be unlaced, one string at a time. Your shoulders drop, your chest expands, your breath becomes deep, slow, and easy. In the 1800s, the physical restriction of clothing mirrored the mental restriction of society. By helping each other out of these cages, women were symbolically and literally caring for one another's freedom. They were the keepers of each other's comfort. The corset is laid across a chair, its whalebone stays silent and still in the moonlight. The heavy silk gown follows, the layers of petticoats are set aside. Now there is only the soft, thin linen of the chemise, breathable, light, and honest. The construction of the Regency lady is gone. What remains is the truth of the human form, resting in the quiet dark. The room smells of lavender water and the fading scent of the day's perfume. The candle on the vanity is a small golden point in a sea of shadows. Everything is soft now. Everything is loose. The day was long. The world was rigid, but the night is fluid. It is a time for the body to recover, for the muscles to soften, and for the mind to drift without a map. You are no longer held upright by the expectations of the world. You are held only by the peace of the night. Close your eyes and feel that lightness. The laces are undone. The cage is open. You are free to sink into the deep, dark velvet of sleep where no one can tell you how to breathe.
The legacy of the ring and the tokens of truth. As the decades of the Regency era faded into the Victorian age, and the women we have followed transitioned from the vibrancy of youth to the stillness of old age, they left behind more than just memories. They left behind tokens. In the dusty corners of museum archives and the velvet-lined drawers of private estates, historians have found small, physical objects that tell the truth when the history books remain silent. Tonight, we look at the legacy of the ring. Pause. Imagine a small gold ring, so thin it feels weightless in your palm. It isn't a wedding band in the traditional sense. There are no diamonds, no grand displays of wealth. Instead, it is a mourning ring or a posy ring. Inside the band, hidden against the skin of the wearer, is a tiny inscription in microscopic cursive. 2 souls, 1 path, or simply forever. These rings were exchanged in private, often without the knowledge of families. They were the invisible bonds. When a woman wore such a ring, she was carrying a silent vow. To the rest of the world, it was just a piece of jewelry, perhaps a gift from a deceased aunt, or a memento of a distant cousin. But to the woman wearing it, the gold was warm with the pulse of a lifelong commitment. Pause. Listen to the soft, muffled sound of a velvet box closing. Thump. Within these boxes, we find other tokens. Lover's eye miniatures, tiny, incredibly detailed paintings of just a single eye encased in a locket. Because the whole face wasn't shown, the identity of the person was a secret. Only the wearer knew whose gaze was resting against her chest. Think about the intimacy of that gaze. In a world where you could not always look at the person you loved in public, you carried their eye with you. It was a way of being seen when you were forced to be invisible. As you lie there, imagine that same feeling of being truly known, truly seen, by someone who doesn't need to see your whole face to know your heart. Historians have also found shared wills. These are perhaps the most moving tokens of all. In an era where women were expected to leave their belongings to male heirs, many of these women left everything, their books, their land, their very clothes, to their beloved companion. These legal documents were their final letters of love. They were a way of ensuring that even in death, they would not be separated. One such will describes a request to be buried in the same grave, or for their hair to be braided together and placed in a single locket. This was the hair memento, a common Regency tradition that took on a profound meaning for these couples. 2 different colors of hair, entwined so tightly they become a single thread. Pause. As you feel the heaviness of sleep pressing down on your eyelids, imagine those gold rings and silk lockets being tucked back into the earth. They are the seeds of a history that is finally beginning to bloom. We are the ones who are finally uncovering them, brushing away the dust of 200 years of silence. The objects are cold now, but the stories they carry are still warm. They remind us that love is not just a feeling, It is a physical fact. It leaves a mark on the world, whether in gold, in ink, or in the very soil of a Welsh valley. Pause. The museum is closing. The glass cases are being covered. The artifacts are returning to the dark. But the legacy remains. It is in the air you breathe. It is in the freedom you have today. It is a quiet golden thread that connects your heart to the hearts of the past. Let the image of the golden ring fade into a circle of light, and then into nothing. You have seen the evidence. You know the truth. You can rest now, knowing that nothing truly beautiful is ever completely lost to time. The final sunset and the eternal sleep. We have traveled through the mists of Wales, the crowded ballrooms of London, and the silent coded diaries of the Yorkshire moors. We have unlaced the corsets of expectation and felt the warmth of the shared tea. Now, our journey reaches its final horizon. The sun is setting on the Regency era, and the long golden shadows are stretching across the landscape of the past, calling us home to a deep and final rest. Imagine standing on the terrace of Plas Newydd one last time. The sky is a masterpiece of fading light, shades of bruised plum, burnt orange, and a deep translucent indigo that is slowly swallowing the valley. The River Dee is a silver thread below, its voice now a distant, hypnotic hum. The air is perfectly still. The birds have found their nests, and the wind has died down to a whisper. In this final hour, the ladies of Llangollen are old. Their hair is white. Their faces are etched with the beautiful geography of 40 shared years. They are sitting together on a stone bench, watching the light disappear. There is no more need for secrets. There is no more need for the silent compact. They have outlived the world that tried to define them. They are at last beyond the reach of time. Listen to the absolute peace of this moment. It is the sound of a life well lived in the shadows. It is the sound of a heart that no longer needs to beat fast with fear or excitement. As you lie there, feel that same profound stillness entering your own limbs. The weight of the day, the weight of the history, and the weight of your own thoughts are all dissolving into this twilight. Death for these women was not a separation. In their wills, in their letters, and in the very way they lived, they ensured they would remain together. Many were buried in the same ground, under the same stone, their names forever entwined in the cold marble. To them, sleep and death were brothers, merely a longer, deeper version of the shared bed where they had found so much sanctuary. Pause. The sun has slipped behind the mountains. The orange glow is gone, replaced by a vast, star-flecked canopy of velvet blue. The first stars are appearing, ancient, steady lights that have watched every era of human history rise and fall. These stars don't judge, they don't label, they simply shine. Think about the silence of the universe. It is a protective, ancient silence. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine yourself becoming part of that starlight. You are weightless. You are timeless. The stories of the Regency women are now tucked away in the library of your mind, safe and sound. You carry their courage in your breath and their peace in your heart. Pause. The house at Plas Newydd is dark now. The candles have all been snuffed. The library is silent. The garden is hidden in the mist. The history has been told, the words have been whispered, and the secrets are safe. There is nothing left to do but let go. Your breathing is slow and deep and rhythmic, like the tide of the Irish Sea, like the ticking of the grandfather clock, like the heart of the valley, in and out, in and out. You are sinking down, past the layers of silk and stone, past the codes and the poems, into the deep, dark, and beautiful water of dreams. Pause. The long-form story is over. The boring history has done its work. The world of 1800 is a dream, and the world of 2026 is fading away. There is only this moment of transition. There is only the peace of the eternal night. Pause. Sleep now. The mist has covered the path. The door is locked. You are safe. You are loved. Pause. Good night, and sleep deep and long.